In today's video, I'm going to read from the book of Job, chapter 1. So grab a KJV if you have one. If you don't, maybe consider getting one. Or if you're on a computer, I guess you can open up a tab and find Job chapter 1, KJV, and read along if you want. Or just listen. And yeah, I still have so much motivation to make videos. I just don't really have any inspiration to look at current event stuff, or nothing's popping out at me. But God is always on my mind, and the whole where did conspiracy took me? It took me from an agnostic to a follower of Jesus Christ. So that is always the main thing on my mind these days. And when I'm on track. And right now I just want to read from the book of Job. I think it's a really cool book of the Bible that doesn't get talked about a lot, and only if you seek it out to research it. So I think it's full of really cool stuff. And does anyone know anything about the book of Ezra? I'm just asking this because I know two different people that recently named their children Ezra, and wasn't there just that horrible famous person named Ezra in the news for sexual assault stuff? So I thought it was weird that people were naming their children after that. Obviously, they weren't naming it after that. They just think the name is cool, I guess. But let me know in the comments, what do you know about the book of Ezra? Because I don't think I'm going to read every single chapter from the book of Job. It's possible, but I just want to read chapter 1 today. Leave as many comments as you want. I don't mind. So if there's one verse that you have to say something about it, go ahead and leave a comment. If there's another verse, don't feel like you can't leave a comment because you already left one. And yeah, let's get into it. The book of Job. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. So I'm just going to throw out my personal theories here. Leave your theories down below, or if you think my theories are outrageous or whatever. Uz, I think, could be Oz or Australia, and I believe that Job could have been way back in Pangea times. I believe in Pangea because the continents look like they fit together like puzzle pieces. And yeah, I believe that Earth used to be one continuous thing. Maybe that was like Babel times when the Tower of Babel happened. Maybe Earth was like Pangea, and it was after they were spread out that things literally separated. But yeah, my guess for Job is Job lived in Australia. I don't know why I think that, but that's what I think. And it says later that he was known the most well known, I don't know, the most blessed person, you might say, in the East, and he was known for that. And Australia is in the East, so anyways, let's keep reading. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. To me, that just goes in with him being perfect and obviously supernaturally blessed. The perfect thing, I guess, is another thing I want to say before I forget, is doing minimal research on Job. Yeah, you see a lot of people saying, hey, what's this book of Job about? Or, hey, this is hard to hear book of Job stuff. And people don't like it. Oh man, why did God let Satan do that? And I think that's a really superficial understanding, and not seeing that God works in mysterious and really big ways that might not immediately seem to make sense to us. And I think the book of Job actually addresses the problem of evil really well. And it, in my opinion, it's almost like a megalomania thing when people see something that God does and they think that they know better, and they'll say well, that doesn't seem right, that's rude or whatever, instead of saying, well, I must not understand it correctly. People put themselves above God a lot, I feel. And anyways, 7 sons. 7 is a very important number. It represents strength, power, might. So to have 7 sons and 3 daughters, it's almost like the biblically perfect family. You're not all sons. That's more like the Free Martin dream, to have 10 sons. But to have 7 sons and 3 daughters, you have your 3 beautiful daughters and you have 7 strong sons. It just, to me, even that aspect of Job's life seems like supernaturally destined, and part of Satan's later we'll see Satan's like, well, the only reason that Job is godly is because he's so blessed. Like, Job was beyond blessed, and the 7 sons, 3 daughters thing, I think, is a significant aspect of that. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. Sounds like a really nice, happy family unit, and like the brothers and sisters got along a lot. It seems like maybe Job's children lived too cushy of a life. And, Job was blessed beyond comprehension from what we can think today. It almost seems like all of his sons had their own houses, so it seems like they lived on some really big estate, and they all had big mansions. They probably had all sorts of servants and things, and that they could just party all day. And continuing on. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. This reminds me of parts of the Bible that talk about your whole house shall be saved. I think it's very possible that Job's children were saved. So in my opinion, maybe they did believe in God, and maybe they really did think that God was important, but they lived a cushy life. They were able to just drink wine all day and party in each other's mansions all day, but maybe the righteousness of Job spared them. I mean, they also were murdered. Their lives were cut short, and they were murdered by Satan. So maybe God took pity on them, and I don't know the whole story, but I think sometimes we can save our family that would potentially otherwise not necessarily be saved. But I would say, well, it was always God's plan, and I don't think that he would save somebody that's totally evil, that just so happens to be related to you or a part of your household. But I think that there probably is some truth to when the Bible talks about you and your household shall be saved. I don't think it works on like literally anybody who's saved, anybody who's in their house is saved. I think it's more of if you're a righteous head of a household, you can spiritually aid the people that are underneath you. I think that's the spirit of that. Where was I? So Job knew that his children goof around too much, but he didn't go berate them. He woke up early and asked God, in the way that he knew, doing the sacrifices, he asked God for forgiveness for their sins. So he wasn't berating them. That's something even I could take to heart as a parent, to ask God to forgive your children for their trespasses, and to be very forgiving of their trespasses, and not to just berate your children for making mistakes. That's something that I need to do. Verse 6, Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. The rest of this is just so cool and cinematic. You think of this as being in like a movie, some Hollywood production of Satan coming up to the throne of God and talking to him. And I just think of, my wife likes old shows like Buffy and I don't know, and they're always like just the angelic intrigue. I don't know what you want to call it. It seems like political angelic stuff going on, which is very interesting. Verse 7, And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. Of course, there's other parts of the Bible that talk about Satan going to and fro in the earth and ready to devour like a lion. Who hears Satan in my video right now trying to make my video loud, full of lawnmower noises? Making this video today has been full of disruptions. I just think it's funny. And I don't know if you can hear it, but hopefully I'm trying to speak loudly. Verse 8, And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Oh, I don't know if I said it earlier, because this is my second time recording this, how Job does a lot of things that Jesus does or later talks about. Jesus told us to be perfect, and Job actually was perfect. And I'm not saying totally sinless, like Jesus, but enough to be called perfect. So I feel like in that situation, if Job ever did sin, he would immediately repent. And I think that would be the way for a human to be perfect. They would never be perfect in the same way that Jesus is, like faultless, but perfect. Job was perfect in the eyes of God, apparently. And so, yeah, there's a lot of similarities between Job and Jesus. And I think that just shows evidence that people back then could know Jesus. And today we have the Bible that can allow us to know Jesus, but we can also know Jesus spiritually. And so I think that people who loved God, they could actually form a relationship with Jesus without knowing his name. But we saw in the last video that Job even talked about a redeemer. So Job knew that he would be redeemed by somebody that would literally come to earth. So in the same way, Job was able to know right from wrong and what is good well enough to be perfect. So verse 9. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made an edge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And so here, of course, the book of Job does a really good job of letting you know what's happening right in the beginning. That this is basically the point of the book of Job, that Job was a perfect, righteous person. He was highly blessed. And Satan goes to God and says, well, the only reason that Job is a righteous person and loves God is because he's so blessed. If you take away all his blessings, he will curse you. And of course, through reading the book of Job, you'll see that's not the case. And we even see that here in this chapter. So this reminds me of prosperity gospel, and how that's a big way to see that prosperity gospel is totally false. The Bible actually says the opposite. And Jesus told us the opposite, that you're going to suffer in this life. And yeah, so let's continue. Verse 13, and there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, The oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them, and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, The fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep, and the servants, and consumed them. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So I think that this verse 16 is actually a really interesting verse that shows that things in the Bible can't always be taken at face value and taken out of context. Because if you just read that verse, the verse says the fire of God is fallen from heaven, but that's not what actually happened at all. This is Satan doing these things. God, because Satan, if you go back, it even says, Satan says, well, you should do these things to Job. Put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee. And God doesn't do it. He says, all that he hath is in thy power. He allows Satan to do it. There's a difference between God doing evil things to somebody. That doesn't happen. Or God allowing Satan to do things, which he does do. And that's where a lot of surface level people have issues with that, and they think that they don't agree with God on that stuff. And I think that those people lack humility and need to understand that God is bigger than them and more understanding than them and works bigger than that. And even, in my opinion, even from a utilitarian point of view, obviously, if we're here today reading the book of Job, this story has a huge impact. So even if Job did suffer greatly because God allowed Satan to do things to him, it's clear that Job had all sorts of positive net gain from that. I mean, and later in the book, Job gets all sorts of things back, but then you still might say, but still, his family was killed. It's, life isn't sunshine and rainbows, and suffering is a part of life, and Satan prowls the earth, ready to devour like a lion. These are just truths of life. And they would say, well, God could stop that from happening, but okay, you're not God, you don't get to choose, and why do you think that you know better? That's how I feel about that. It feels very megalomaniac when people disagree with things that God does. Verse 17, while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. Isn't it interesting that it really does seem here that they say men to mean boys, I don't know how old they were, Job's sons and daughters. It seems like they use men as a catch-all for mankind a lot of times here. Because I think they all died. So I guess you would have to say that men is being used to mean all of them, like mankind, men. Like they just didn't, if it was a group, they could just say it like that, or that the women didn't even count and they weren't talking about them. But I don't think that's the case. I think that men probably meant the sons and daughters. Verse 20. So what does Job do? This is another instance of Job being Christ-like. So another example in the Bible is when Stephen was martyred, he asked for forgiveness of the people that were killing him. So followers of Jesus Christ act in Christ-like ways. And so it's interesting that somebody before Jesus was on earth was able to act in such Christ-like ways. And yeah, this just, I think, goes into that problem. People ask, oh, how could you be saved before Jesus? Well, the people were able to act like Jesus acts through knowing. They probably were just godly people, and they had divine inspiration. They knew right from wrong. And I think they probably were able to have relationships with Jesus without necessarily knowing all of how it worked. I mean, Job, my last video, Job knew that there would be a redeemer that came to earth. Okay, and so these are such cool verses. Job, chapter 1, verses 20 through 22. So Job, his whole life just crumbled around him in a matter of minutes. His entire life has been taken away from him, except his health at this point, but that's coming later. Verse 20, then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped, and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. What a cool reaction. This is just the stuff that I think of when people try to say that people in times past were stupid or less intelligent just because they had different different societal technological levels. Just the philosophical and poetic depth to the things that people would say. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So that is some beautiful wisdom from Job. And let me know what you think of this video. God bless everyone.